The Tower of London did not rise from stone and ambition alone, but from fear, blood, and the absolute power of the crown. And the most disturbing truth is that its walls were built to terrify as much as to defend. From the moment construction began after the Norman conquest, the tower was designed not merely as a fortress, but as a message carved into the skyline, a warning to a conquered city that resistance was over. Ordinary laborers hauled stone under brutal conditions, while prisoners were brought inside long before the structure was finished, trapped within cold chambers that would later become infamous. What makes the tower unsettling is that its purpose was clear from the start: control through intimidation, justice through spectacle, and silence enforced by stone. Long before it became a symbol of monarchy, it was already a place where power decided who lived, who suffered, and who vanished without trace. As the tower expanded, its role shifted from royal residence to instrument of punishment, and life inside became defined by confinement and uncertainty. Prisoners ranged from common criminals to nobles accused of treason, all subject to the same thick walls and iron doors. Some were held for years without trial, others were interrogated until confessions were extracted, and many never left alive. Torture was not constant, but its possibility shaped every moment, because survival depended on obedience and favor rather than innocence. The tower's design reflected this reality. Narrow stairways, isolated chambers, and controlled movement ensured that prisoners remained disoriented and powerless. Outside, executions were staged as public events, turning death into spectacle and reinforcing the tower's reputation as a place where the crown's will was final and absolute. Over time, the Tower of London became less a building and more a system, one that fused architecture with fear to maintain authority. Beheadings, imprisonments, and silent disappearances were not accidents of history, but functions of a structure built to dominate both body and mind. What history often sanitizes as royal justice was experienced by those inside as isolation, terror, and waiting for release, confession, or death. The tower endures today as a monument, but its stones still carry the memory of lives constrained and ended within them. Understanding how it was built reveals not just engineering skill, but a calculated use of suffering to shape power, reminding us that some of history's greatest structures were raised not only by hands, but by fear made permanent. As centuries passed, the tower's reputation deepened, shaped by the countless individuals who entered its gates under accusation and left only as names recorded in history or forgotten entirely. Imprisonment within the tower was not a single experience, but a spectrum of suffering determined by status, favor, and timing. Some prisoners lived in relative comfort, able to write letters and receive visitors, while others were confined to damp, lightless cells where time lost meaning. This imbalance was intentional, reinforcing the idea that mercy was a privilege granted by the crown rather than a right. The uncertainty itself became a form of punishment, as prisoners never knew whether they would be released, transferred, or executed. The tower did not need constant violence to maintain control because fear filled the spaces between decisions, wearing people down long before any sentence was carried out. What becomes clear in examining the tower's construction and use is that it was designed to function psychologically as much as physically. Its imposing walls separated prisoners from the city, cutting them off from identity, reputation, and hope. Even those awaiting execution lived in a suspended state, aware that crowds would soon gather to witness their death, turning personal tragedy into public affirmation of royal power. Beheading was swift, but the days or months leading to it were filled with isolation and anticipation, a suffering rarely acknowledged in simplified retellings. The Tower of London was not simply a backdrop for punishment, but an active participant in it, shaping how power was enforced and remembered. In understanding how it was built and used, we confront a history where authority relied not only on law or force, but on fear-made architectural trapping lives within stone designed to outlast them. As the tower's use continued across generations, it absorbed layer upon layer of human experience until its walls became witnesses to fear rather than mere stone. Each ruler inherited not just the structure, but the system it represented, a place where accusations could be contained, truth delayed, and outcomes decided behind locked doors. Prisoners learned quickly that survival depended less on justice than on politics, alliances, and timing, because guilt and innocence carried little weight inside the tower. Many waited in silence, listening to footsteps echo through corridors, measuring time by sound rather than light. For some, hope lingered in the form of royal pardon, while for others, certainty arrived only when guards came to lead them out for execution. The tower created a unique kind of suffering, one rooted in anticipation and powerlessness rather than immediate violence. Looking back, the construction of the Tower of London reveals a deeper truth about how authority was built and maintained. Its stones were arranged to dominate the landscape, but also to dominate perception, reminding everyone who saw it that the crown's reach was absolute. Torture, imprisonment, and beheading were not isolated acts of cruelty, but parts of a broader system designed to enforce obedience through fear and spectacle. The tower stands today as a symbol of history, yet its origins and purpose expose the cost at which such symbols were created. To understand how the tower was built is to understand how power was reinforced through suffering, how lives were trapped within walls meant to endure, and how fear itself became a tool of governance shaped into stone and carried forward through centuries of silence. As time moved forward, the tower's presence became so deeply embedded in the life of the city that it shaped how people understood authority, loyalty, and punishment. The mere sight of its walls was enough to quiet dissent, because everyone knew what happened to those who crossed the crown. Stories of prisoners spread through London, whispered in markets and taverns, reinforcing fear more effectively than public announcements ever could. The tower did not need to act often, because its reputation carried weight on its own. Those brought inside were stripped not only of freedom, but of certainty, forced to wait as decisions were made far beyond their reach. For many, the psychological toll was greater than physical pain, because hope was stretched thin across weeks, months, or years of confinement. In the end, the Tower of London stands as more than a historical structure. It is a record of how power was constructed through controlled suffering. Torture, imprisonment, and execution were not excesses of a cruel age, but calculated tools used to stabilize rule in a world where authority was constantly challenged. The tower survived because it fulfilled its purpose effectively, binding fear to architecture and permanence to punishment. Understanding how it was built and used forces us to confront an uncomfortable reality that some of history's most enduring monuments were designed not to protect people, but to control them. Behind its stone walls, lives were trapped, broken, and ended, leaving a legacy that still echoes through its corridors, reminding us that power, once carved into stone, can outlast those who suffered to sustain it. As the centuries layered themselves onto the tower, its role evolved in form, but never in essence, remaining a place where power resolved its conflicts away from the public eye. New wings were added, chambers repurposed, and defenses reinforced, yet the core function endured, to isolate, intimidate, and decide fates in silence. Those imprisoned within its walls often described time as their greatest enemy, because days blurred together without certainty or news. Even the privileged felt the weight of confinement, knowing that status offered only temporary protection. For the condemned, the tower became a space where identity dissolved, replaced by waiting, reflection, and fear of what was inevitable. The building itself dictated behavior, narrowing movement, limiting light, and enforcing submission without a word spoken. In reflecting on how the Tower of London was built and used, it becomes clear that its true strength lay not in stone, but in the system it embodied. Torture was rare but feared. Execution was swift but anticipated, and imprisonment lingered in between, eroding resistance through time and isolation. The tower's legacy is not just one of cruelty, but of control refined over generations, a reminder that architecture can be used to shape obedience as effectively as law or force. Today, the tower stands as a symbol of heritage, yet beneath that image lies a history of trapped lives and silenced voices. To understand its construction is to understand how fear was designed, maintained, and passed down, leaving behind a monument built as much from human suffering as from stone. As memory fades and legend replaces lived experience, the Tower of London risks being reduced to spectacle rather than understood as a mechanism of power built with intent. Yet every corridor, chamber, and gate was shaped by deliberate choices meant to control human behavior. The tower taught obedience not through constant force, but through the certainty that resistance would end within its walls. Those who passed through its gates became examples. Whether they survived or not, their stories absorbed into the collective fear that stabilized rule. The city learned to live in the shadow of the tower, adjusting speech, loyalty, and ambition around the knowledge that authority had a place to silence dissent permanently. Its influence extended far beyond its walls, shaping behavior without needing to act. In the end, the true story of how the Tower of London was built is not only about construction, conquest, or defense, but about the creation of fear as infrastructure. Tortured, trapped, and beheaded lives were not unfortunate side effects, but essential components of a system designed to endure. The tower stands today as a preserved monument, yet its most enduring legacy is invisible. The understanding that power can be made permanent when fear is given form. Behind its stone facade lies a history of lives interrupted and ended, reminding us that some of the world's most famous landmarks were built not just to last, but to be obeyed.